Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance. Join our hosts as they discuss a wide range of topics and speak with leading cybersecurity, technology, and compliance experts. Now is the time for Secure Talk.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. Secure Talk is brought to you by Adequest, your cybersecurity compliance partner. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I'll be your host for this episode of Secure Talk. Today, we're being joined by Laurentiu Spilca, who is a Java developer and trainer. He's also an author and speaker, and the Group Java Community Lead for Endava. Laurentiu recently published his book, Spring Security in Action, which is available through Manning Publications. And we're going to be talking about how Spring Security can be used by Java developers to produce more secure applications. Laurentiu, how are you today?
Fine, a little bit tired. It's late here already.
It's late. Well, where is here for you?
I live in Bucharest, Romania.
Wow. How are things going there? I mean, the whole world's kind of been crazy this year. How have things been in Romania?
Same crazy as everywhere. So this year was the pandemic year, the coronavirus year, whatever you want to name it, it was everywhere. I usually like to travel, but this year I didn't have the chance. I actually remember in February I had some conferences planned. I used to talk at different conferences around the world, and they got canceled just one after the other, and I didn't have the chance to participate to any other event than an online one during this year. But
yeah. I mean, it's amazing. I kind of think we have taken a lot of things for granted. The ease at which we can just hop on a plane and get to the other side of the planet and go and travel and see family and friends, and all of that has been kind of taken away from us this year. But at the same time, you've seen a lot of innovation. I mean, have some of those conferences gone virtual?
Yes, and people learned how to work online. In the end, we weren't used to do everything from our, sometimes from our dormitories, but now we discovered that this is possible, and we've managed to adapt and to work from home. I personally really like very much the office, and I like to interact a lot with people. It was really difficult for me to work from home that much, but we got used to it, and finally now it seems it just became a habit in the end. But I have to admit that I can't wait to escape this situation and go back in an office and go back to conferences, discuss with people, have a beer together, and so on and so forth.
I 100% agree with you. I actually started 2020 in Japan. I was living in Japan, setting up our Japanese rep office. And Japanese culture is probably one of the most conservative and slow-changing large cultures in the world. And, the idea of work from home in Japan has never really taken root. This year, though, companies were forced into it. And all of a sudden, the light bulb went on, and a lot of companies are like, wow, we can do this, and we can improve, we can cut our costs. We can improve employee satisfaction because they don't have to get on a crowded train. And then they start developing all these different hybrid models because, like you said, people do miss the human interaction, and there's a lot of value that can become from, just bumping into a colleague in the hallway and having a conversation. So a lot of companies have taken like a hybrid approach where, 2 days in, 3 days out, distance in the office. I would, at some point, somebody's going to have to write a book, kind of talking about all the innovation in work models that have come out of 2020. But you mentioned you go to a lot of conferences because you're very, very active in the Java development community. Is that correct?
Yes.
And do you primarily focus on security issues, or is it basically all Java related issues?
Yes, not necessarily. It's the Java ecosystem in general. It's mainly only Java. I have to be honest with you. I'm not a front-end developer. I'm a back-end developer, and I'm only in the Java ecosystem. I like to stay. I find Java ecosystem to be large enough for me to always find questions, issues to solve, and different problems to keep me busy. So I didn't have the chance to get out of it. I mostly work on, and I've worked on Spring applications, but I've started a long time ago with Java EE, which lately became Jakarta EE, somewhere in the autumn of the fall of 2017, if I remember correctly. And in terms of kinds of issues I work on, they are different. Not only security, I happen to have written a book on Spring security, but I solve and I consult companies and developers and teams with different kinds of problems, from performance related issues to clean coding and class design and architecture, mainly the technical part with choosing technologies from the Java ecosystem depending on the kind of applications they have, and of course security. Why, that's one of the topics I've written a book about.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really important because you have a very broad perspective versus somebody who is just, for example, focused on security. They might not be able to relate to some of the business requirements or some of the other requirements of the app that's being developed. But when you have that broad perspective, you can kind of see how things fit together. And I read your book, Spring Security in Action. Highly recommended. And later on, I'll explain to our listeners how they can download a copy or purchase a copy from Manning Publications. But why don't we talk a little bit about, I want to come back to Spring Security, but first off, why is it difficult for developers to build security into an application? I mean, what are the challenges there?
First of all, in regards to Spring Security especially, it seems that there was a lack of documentation lately, and even if Spring Security has a good reference, a lot of things are missing, like the practical, the things that come with experience of working on a specific security aspect of an application. So usually a reference tells you how to use a specific class or a specific interface, maybe the way the class design of a specific framework looks like. But in order to be able to properly use any kind of framework, not only Spring Security, in an application, you have to, first of all, be very aware of the business of the application that you implement. That's something I always recommend all developers. First of all, when you start working on an application, make sure that you understand as much as possible what the business is. That gives you a lot of clues which can help you with security issues, avoiding vulnerabilities, performance related problems, and so on and so forth. But another problem is that it seems a lot of solutions have been implemented, and because of the lack of documentation, people sometimes found what I call workarounds on specific issues. So instead of, for example, when developers had to implement a no-auth system, and they found out they have to use a specific kind of token implementation like a JWT, instead of researching deeper or finding in a complete resource that Spring Security supports that implementation out of the box, they started to implement filters and use Spring Security, but kind of with custom implementations. That one with the JWT token and the OAuth is one of my favorites because I find it very, very often. So I'm working as a consultant, and I happen with this job I have to see a lot of projects. And one of the most frequently one of the most frequent problems I see in different applications, projects from different teams, maybe different companies, is that what people can't actually, or they have lack in knowledge of a specific framework, they tend to customize it somehow the way they understand. And not only that, they do that, and then developers maybe don't go deep enough in studying the framework as they should, but they find a lot of fast, quick articles around the web that describe already the way others did that in a wrong fashion. And not that articles are not good, they are excellent. We need that, and I love all the blogs and the websites where I find different solutions. But what everyone has to understand is that searching for a specific solution and finding an article that solves that is not enough. You have to research a bit, to spend a little bit of more time. It gets value in the end by seeing multiple articles and multiple solutions for a specific problem, for solving a specific problem, and then deciding which one of those, or maybe a combination of those, is the solution for what you need. But developers tend to actually get fast the first link they find on Google. If that solves their problem, then they simply implement it, but that might not necessarily fit perfectly with what they need.
I think that's some very good advice. I mean, you definitely need to verify whatever solution that you're going to implement. Let's take a step back. Can you define Spring Security? Give a kind of short, concise explanation of what it really is.
Spring Security is pretty simple. It's a framework helping you to implement application-level security. Mainly, it refers to implementing authentication and authorization. So authentication, we can implement that in different fashions that they are, say, well known, like you can authenticate with a username and a password, so a set of credentials. You can do that via in a web application, say via an HTTP header, like the case of HTTP Basic, which is probably the most straightforward way of authenticating. But you can as well have in a web application a form where we introduce those credentials. And Spring Security provides these authentication styles out of the box, some of them, but also gives you the possibility to write a custom authentication logic in case you don't, in your app, you can't fit one of those that are well known. Let's call them like this. And same with authorization. It allows you implement faster the authorization, which is allowing the authenticated user to do something based on who they are. Now, Spring Security, of course, as any other framework, the main purpose is to allow you implement this authentication and authorization with avoiding writing a lot of boilerplate code. Because if you'd like to take and implement authentication and authorization out of the box without any framework in your application, you will maybe write 10, maybe 20 times more code than if you are using a framework. So first of all, you get rid of the boilerplate code and you use some of the features out of the box. And secondly, by using those features that are also used by a lot of other developers and in a lot of other projects in the community, you are sure that it's less probable that you find vulnerabilities there, because if you implement your own solution, then you have to either very roughly test it, but you still test it it's only you who tests it. But if you use a framework like Spring Security, you know that if something was there during and the specific vulnerability was introduced with a specific version, it's more likely that somebody would have already found it, because there are so many projects using the same logic. So by using a framework, in case of Spring Security, by using Spring Security, you also make sure that there are less chances you introduce vulnerabilities in your application.
Totally makes sense. Why don't we even take a little bit another step back? I mean, that was an excellent introduction to Spring Security, but maybe some listeners are thinking, well, yeah, I mean, security is important, but why is it so essential these days? And what does what is a secure application? I mean, because there are varying degrees of security, but based upon the work that you've done and the projects that you've been involved with, why is security so important? And what does it actually mean to be secure?
Yes, so in general, we refer to the user's resources because in the end, what an application does is processing data, and that data belongs to someone. And usually, what happens is that you don't want anyone to access any data that's processed. You have specific situations in which specific users can access only some data they are allowed to, and not only access. When I say access, I don't only refer to get it. I also refer to be able to change it somehow, because in the end, again, the app is processing data. So the ability of retrieving data or changing data in specific ways is privileged for specific users. If you have, just as a short example for everyone, if you have an email application, you just implemented your own Gmail, let's call it like this. You want to make sure that each user is only able to see their own emails, their own email messages. And for example, if I have an account, I'm not able by any means to see messages that were sent or received by another user of the system. And you can now go and take any other example and any other scenario, and you will see that some of them are more sensitive than others. So for example, you have an email application. Of course, you don't want to share your messages with another user, but imagine that you also have a mobile banking application. So I'm definitely sure you don't want to share your account and your money with somebody else. So you have situations depending on your application and the business of the application, where the possibility of accessing data is riskier than in other cases. But in general, in any application, you have a degree of risk. And what you want is to protect the data, to make sure that only the users that are allowed, that should access the data, they are not only those are allowed to access the data.
Okay, so let me ask you, on the projects that you've been involved with, or in the projects that you've followed, is there somebody or a team that's specifically looking at the security, the risk to reward? Because nothing's 100% secure, but you can make things very, very secure, sometimes at a cost to development time and resources, and maybe drag on the efficiency of the application, right? I mean, if I as a user have to MFA every single step of the way, I'm probably not going to use this application. But so in your experience, who's the one that points out, hey, you know what? Here's something that we need to make more secure, or we should consider making it more secure. Is that a team effort? Is that an individual? I mean, what works best?
It really depends. So I've seen in many projects, I've seen cases where there's no person allocated for that, but I've also seen projects where they had a teams only for the security part, and even specific projects more sensitive where they had actually a couple of teams for the security. It was a team. I'm not sure actually who invented this philosophy, but I've seen that applied in a couple of projects where a specific team basically was responsible with making sure the released app doesn't have any vulnerability, and the second team was trying to actually break the application afterwards. So it was kind of a competition between these two teams. But this is a very fortunate case, because unfortunately what I've seen is that in many cases there is no dedicated person for the security. So it's even better if the team working on the development is aware of what security means, because in a lot of cases it relies only on them to make sure that the application is not vulnerable. What else I've seen in projects in terms of managing security is integrating the security in the DevOps process, because for some years already we have this DevOps philosophy, I like to call it, because it's kind of a philosophy, of a working philosophy between teams. And we call it DevOps in terms of the communication between development of the app up to the release of the application in the end. And it's kind of, you can imagine it as a pipeline where you do a lot of activities where part of them are done by the development team, some other is done by the operations team, and some of them are done all together. Now in the DevOps lately, some development teams integrated this concept of DevSecOps, the dev security operations, development security and operations. So integrating the security as part of the process itself and as part of, how I like to call it, the definition of done. Be sure that you have tested and secured your application properly before releasing it in an environment.
Yeah, it's interesting because different organizations have different, I guess, risk profiles and maturity levels, and I guess viewpoints towards security. It traditionally seems, and we're not really on the development side, but even on the the platform protection side, there sometimes is a separation between business goals and security goals. And we find in the organizations where security and business are fully aligned, in fact, where the business understands that a secure platform actually brings value to the end user, whether the customers are buying something, a service, etc., because you can sell security as part of the value added of the platform or the application. Security, makes the end product more attractive. But oftentimes organizations kind of lose sight of that. I mean, why is that in your opinion?
I'm most probably it's because of the stakeholders not being aware of the consequences that what can happen if you don't invest in security. And indeed, as you say, one of the problems is the investment itself, because once you dedicate a team for security, or even dedicate time from your development team to be sure that the system is secure, and that again, as you mentioned earlier, it's even on multiple levels. So we now discuss about application level security because we started from the Spring security, but you have this many levels where it's the infrastructure itself needs to be secure, the network has to be secure, and so on and so forth. So in this DevSecOps, you have actually people from different places taking care about security. So the more people you involve, of course, the more costly it is to take care of security. But now, of course, you also, as you said, you don't have to MFA any kind of operation. So there is a limit somewhere. You have to find the compromise. The right compromise where you invest as less as possible, but get the needed security out of it. Now, why a lot of applications are not necessarily secure, and we see that's not that much as desired investment in security as it should be, is because, of course, development is expensive. So taking time from your development team costs money, and in most cases, the stakeholders tend to see only the business use cases, and they are very happy if they see that they press the button and some digits change on the screen or whatever, on the web page or whatever that is. They see that as being a complete solution. But if of course, if that's working, but somebody can actually steal data or even change data or so on, depending on the application, that can rely on severe consequences. Like even in case of getting some private data, now in Europe we have the GDPR, and this is a set of regulations that in case some user finds out somehow their private data have been stolen or lost through your application, basically the company will be we will have to pay a lot of money basically to compensate that. And there are a lot of stories out there with people that stored their credit cards details for different ride-sharing applications, and then they found out that in a totally different country somebody was actually using their card and their money for different rides where they've never been to. Of course, in these cases, you risk to be sued and then to lose, first of all, money, and then lose the brand and the image of a company, which is very valuable. We know, again, a lot of stories where when some kind of company loses brand or image, they then even tend to get bankrupt because of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, reputational risk, compliance, and regulatory risk are huge and oftentimes ignored until it's too late. It's funny because I was involved in the development of a platform that actually the selling point was security. And so I don't know if you're familiar with like the localization or translation industry, but traditionally you have thousands and thousands of freelance translators all around the world. And then you have enterprises, customers who say, hey, we want these documents translated. They'll send it to a translation company, and then they would, typically, historically, use email to send these documents out to translators. Now imagine you've got translators all over the world working from home. That's not the most secure way to handle information. And some information, maybe it's not really that important. But, sometimes we were working with consulting companies, large financial institutions, and when, they would say, we don't feel comfortable with you sending our information to translators. We want you to have those translators on site. Well, that's, very, very expensive because maybe you're doing 20 different languages and you need 20 different linguists, and then you have to bring them on site. It's actually sometimes logistically just not even possible. So the company that I was with actually developed a platform where instead of emailing the documents, you could share the documents through a web application. The translator could view the document and type in a translation, but they weren't able to download the text, copy the text. I'm sure that you couldn't do screenshots. I'm sure they could pull out their phone. There's always a workaround and they take a picture, but it brought the security up to the point where we were actually able to go out and acquire a lot more business because of the security of our platform. And I think that's a good example in my mind of actually putting security as a business benefit, right, as opposed to a cost or a drag. And I think, if I'm going to look at a bank that I'm going to use, or any other company actually that is going to access my information, I want to know that they're being careful with it. And oftentimes, in the U.S., we're not really famous for our our data security practices. Hopefully, that's going to change. But my point is, security can be an asset and not just a protection against those potential risks. Let me ask you, what are some of the common vulnerabilities that you're seeing in your ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a very good question because I have plenty of examples. I will try to resume to maybe a couple or maybe three of them that I very often see. And in most cases, the most encountered vulnerabilities are those that are the most obvious. They look simple. They look like they can't harm anyone, but they actually can be good pieces into the puzzle that say somebody, a bad-intentioned individual, can use then to access the data. So most of the vulnerabilities happen because first of all of the negligence of the developers, but in a lot of cases because of the lack of time, of course, because if you don't allow your developers take the time to review what they have done. They will kind of skip some cases, which is human, which is normal. So it's, in my opinion, not their fault. So one of them that I very often see is using dependencies that have vulnerabilities. Even though in a lot of we have solutions for say making this check automatic, and there are even Maven plugins we can use. For example, I'm again discussing only on Java side. There are ways to integrate the checks in your development continuous integration pipeline and so on. I tend to see that there's still a lot of cases where I find dependencies with known vulnerabilities. So you basically have a specific dependency at a specific version in your POM.xml file. Say you have a Maven project, and that one is basically known for having some kind of vulnerability that an attacker can use to do something bad, say with your application. Sometimes it's stealing the data, sometimes it's simply putting your application down. So that's a very often one. So what I usually do, first of all, in the projects I work myself on, because I also work as a developer, not only as a consultant, I always make sure when I increase version number that I check again all my POM.xml if I do that for an application, and review the versions. And in the continuous integration pipeline, I do recommend doing that automatically as well. So there are solutions I won't detail now for validating this, and it's best if you can actually enforce that from your pipeline level, because then the developer, if they add some kind of dependency which they happen to copy paste from a specific article, as I said, it's happening previously, they simply copy paste that into their POM.xml, they don't check it, and then if that version they've copied, that dependency that they copied has the vulnerability, then they will be notified by the pipeline, and the pipeline will fail, and then they will have to check it. So that's one of the best. Now, in some cases, in terms of Spring security especially, it happens that I find here and there people introducing vulnerability for not understanding correctly how to use different features of the framework. One of my favorites, I also have it described in more detail in the book, is the use of the AND matchers versus the MVC matchers. What happens, that's a very, very small detail, but it's one of the features that I find very frequently misused. If you use AND matchers, in some cases you might leave out, so you might apply the security authorization rules that you write on one path, but what you don't know is that Spring for the same endpoint can associate multiple paths, and if you only apply the authorization configurations on one path and the endpoint is accessible through multiple other paths, then all the other paths might remain unsecure, might remain unprotected. And I actually found that even in an application at some point. Of course, I can't give names, and not names of neither applications or companies, but I even found that at some point in an application that was related to payments. And that's pretty tricky, because you don't want somebody from outside being able to actually call a specific endpoint and make a specific payment if they are not allowed by the user who actually owned the money. And that was one of the say very small details, but that can bring very damaging results in the end.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about too, at another level, I mean, your observations just reinforces your earlier point about the importance of being part of a framework and a community where you can learn from each other, right? And I mean, you're sharing super valuable information right there. If I was on a small development project, and I'm tasked with this, and I'm like, where do I go? And just listening to what you're talking about there, like 3 or 4 different light bulbs are going to come on and be helpful. So yeah, thank you. Please keep going.
So yeah, another very it looks again very small but that's very very often I find in applications. I can't say all the applications, but in a lot of applications, maybe the majority, is not treating correctly or completely all the exceptions thrown by your application. So it happens that an application throws exceptions at some point. The reasons might be business-wise, business-related, because an exception in Java can be simply a business case that you want to that the developer wants to throw, and in order to treat it somewhere else in the application. Or it can be a technical thing, like I cannot connect to a database, or I cannot connect to a specific other microservice, or things like that. But the idea is that what happens is that especially with a web application, you need to make sure what gets out in the HTTP response. So you have endpoints and you call them, you do some HTTP requests, you get back the HTTP response. If an exception occurred on the service level in the backend, and you don't make sure what gets out in the HTTP response in that case, you might find out that specific messages that are caused by exceptions you might not have written yourself. They might be part of different libraries that you use. They might contain sensitive data. My favorite is when using a client, an HTTP client to connect to a specific other service, and the connection fails. I've seen very often cases where in the response there are messages like could not connect to a specific application on a specific IP and a specific port. And then if you have something like that and you expose an IP and the port, even if they are local IPs and port, they are not public, of course. They are some in some kind of a private network. But what happens is that somebody, again, a bad intentioned individual can use that to find out how is your virtual private network configured. And that's, of course, not enough to be able to break something, but it can be a good piece in the puzzle. Because what does actually a bad intentioned individual, a hacker, whatever you want to call them, is that they collect disclosed pieces of information and they put them together. And it's important to give them as less as possible pieces of information. You can't have a 100% secure application, but you can avoid at least putting in your response exceptions that contain sensitive information like IPs, ports, versions of different dependencies you use. Sometimes I see that I don't know, inside the exception stack trace, you see Tomcat and the specific version of Tomcat the application is using, or whatever other dependency, Hibernate. And then you either can find out that specific dependency actually has already a vulnerability, and then you even make the job easier for somebody who wants to take advantage of that, because you not only have used the dependency with vulnerability, but you have also told, hey, here it is. It's vulnerable. Just use it. Or even if it's not vulnerable, you still don't want to do that, because if a specific bad intentioned individual will find out that you use the precise version X 10.2.1, then they will be, of course, more tempted to go and see if that one has a vulnerability, even if it wasn't found already. And maybe they find a vulnerability in that precise version. So you don't want that.
No, 100% agree. One of the key principles that we believe in is make those bad intentioned individuals make their job and life as difficult as possible. It's never going to be 100% secure, but they're looking for the low-hanging fruit. And if you make it easy for them and you give them all the keys to the kingdom and all they've got to do is just do a little bit more on their own, well, you've done their job for them. So make it difficult. 100% agree. Hey, let me ask you this. You've written a book, Spring Security in Action. You have a YouTube channel. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your book and your YouTube channel, other things that you do, and then give us, the listeners, some suggestions for other resources. Because you've just shared a lot of good information. Where else can people look? Of course, you've got your book, your YouTube channel, but what other resources are out there as well?
So let's start with the book itself. First of all, the most valuable thing the books comes with is putting together and in the right order all the things you need to learn to have the basics of Spring Security. I want to be precise and say the book, which is over 500 pages, it still doesn't contain all the Spring Security in the world out there, because if I would have put it there, all the Spring Security in the world, it would have been 2,000 pages, probably wouldn't have been enough for me. But they give you everything you need so that you have the basics and then find out solutions on a solid backbone. If you don't have this backbone, then it's not only more difficult to find solutions, but it's also possible that you find a specific solution which is not the right one, but most probably a workaround. And sometimes workarounds, they are not okay from many perspectives. They can introduce vulnerabilities. Keep in mind the framework still is only a tool. You need to know how to use it. So it's not, as I've also mentioned in the first chapter of the book, if you have an alarm system but you forget to secure your windows, then it's not the alarm system problem that you didn't secure your windows and the thief entered through the windows. Same with Spring Security. But the book basically puts in order. So what you need to do is, if you know nothing or very few about Spring Security, just take it chapter by chapter. And it starts very smoothly in chapter 2. Basically, chapter 1 is the introduction about vulnerabilities and the importance of security. And chapter 2 starts smoothly in action with a small project auto-configured, pre-configured by Spring Boot. And then it shows you component by component in the class design how to configure, how to customize those components chapter by chapter. I say, or I try to do it lean enough to be easy to understand, even if you have zero knowledge on Spring Security. Of course, I expect you understand Java and you know Spring, at least Spring basics already, because otherwise I couldn't actually teach also Spring in this book. But it provides you, unlike resources on the internet that are disclosed, you find something, let's say you search how to implement an OAuth system with Spring Security, you might find an article about the resource server, but you don't know that you first need to learn about JWT tokens, and before that you need to learn about the authorization server, and if you don't know that, before that you have to even learn about the filter chain and so on and so forth. So what the book does is putting in the right order what you need to learn, so that when you start with something, if you don't understand, so you open the book at chapter 10 and you don't understand what's there, it actually means that you had to go a little bit before and read the previous chapters. So again, you can find all the Spring Security now on the web. I'm definitely sure it's the reference out there. There are plenty of articles on different forums. But what's missing is that they are not in the order. You need to make it fast to learn it. And of course, besides that, I also share here and there some of my stories and my experience that you might find, and probably you will find useful when writing your own applications. That's the book.
And just as a reminder, I'm going to put in the podcast description, or this episode's description, I will put some links to the book and your YouTube channel as well. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. The YouTube channel, that's where I try to keep in touch with the community. The YouTube channel is free. I do it for sharing knowledge. It's one of the things I like to do. I'm also a Java trainer, by the way. And it's the place where I try to actually at least once a week create a nice video tutorial about a specific Java technology. It's not necessarily Spring Security, but it's Spring, it's Java fundamentals there. And what I try to do is to most of my videos are live, so I do live events. And in the live events, I actually just share my screen and I explain that concept or that technology by writing an example on the spot. And sometimes it happens that I fail, but I'm glad that sometimes it happens that you find me failing, because that way we can find together a solution. And up to now, it's about 2 years since I started the channel. We found solutions for all the problems where I, for example, didn't manage to do something on the spot. So what I try to do is do something a little bit more live than only some recording, some video tutorials recorded, like you already find on Udemy, for example, or on Safari Books Online, O'Reilly Learning, I think is now the name. That's the difference. And of course, it's free. The disadvantage is not copy edited and not edited in general. So yeah, I don't invest a lot. I have to be honest. I don't invest a lot more than my time in doing those tutorials. But a lot of people found them already as being very useful. So I hope you will find them very useful as well. In regards to other places where you can find information on Spring Security, but also Java related, what I do recommend you is first follow people on Twitter or on LinkedIn. In both social platforms, they have strong communities. And in a lot of cases, I found interesting subjects. Twitter won't tell you how to solve a problem, of course, but you will find an interesting subject that you might say, oh, nice, I want to learn that. And then it gives you the idea. It rings that bell to, I need to learn that. So let's find more knowledge about that. I do recommend you read a lot of books. So in my opinion, the books are the best. Of course, they are the best. They are also cost, but that cost is equivalent in the quality of the material, because a book is always technical proofed, is copy edited. It's most likely that you won't find problems in there, and again, most likely they are written by people based on their experience, which is not something you find in the reference. Somebody asked me in one of my previous YouTube videos, live events, how do I what was the question? It was something like, how do I make sure that what I write in the book is not considered duplicated with the reference or something like that, that I didn't copy from the reference. And I've told them I don't even open the reference in most of the cases when I write my book, because I write simply from my experience. And the only times when I open the reference is, for example, when I'm writing an example, because those code examples are also written by me. And if I simply cannot remember something, only then I'm going and read again the chapter in the reference. So it's not really possible that you will find application in a book with the reference, because usually the authors, the value comes from their experience they shared there.
Just a quick question. Do you find that writing a book or producing your videos, that it helps you to organize your thoughts on a particular topic?
Yes, and that's one of the next things I wanted to tell actually is I do recommend, if you want to learn more something, write articles yourself. It helps you go deeper into a problem and understand it better when you actually try to write about it. So I always recommend everyone who want to learn specific technology. There are so many ways in which you can do that by applying your skills, like writing an article, and that's a very good one, collaborating on an open source project. So if you don't already have an open source project, just choose an open source project. work on the open source project by solving bugs or by testing it and reporting issues or by implementing new features. It helps you again understand that technology better. So, for example, you want to understand Spring better, or I don't know, some Spring Cloud dependency better, then why not trying to collaborate and contribute? And that way you will actually go into the code itself. So you will be forced to do that, and then you will learn it better as well.
That's some great advice. Hey, Laurentiu, it's been great having you on the show. Really appreciate your time. You've shared a lot of valuable information, and I'm sure we could probably talk for several more hours if we wanted to go down any particular rabbit hole around those different vulnerabilities, for example, different best practices, etc. But it's been great having you on. Hopefully in the future the world will get back to normal, and we can cross paths and grab a beer together.
Sure. I'm looking forward to it, actually.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance. Join our hosts as they discuss a wide range of topics and speak with leading cybersecurity, technology, and compliance experts. Now is the time for Secure Talk.